Story 1. We have a customer who apparently got scared into finally becoming payment card industry compliant. My company handles this by using a third-party gateway that tokenizes the credit card data, and we store that token, ensuring that even if a hacker got their data and decrypted it, there would be no credit card numbers or cardholder information obtained. This customer was one of our last holdouts to the olden days when you were able to enter credit card numbers to be seen by all. They had been refusing to update their software for years because of this, because there was so much preparation required on their end, primarily going through the software and transcribing credit card numbers from comment and note fields into actual credit card fields to be tokenized. We gave them 90 days from the software update until we enabled payment card industry compliance and wiped the database of credit card numbers. Each week we send their management a warning email reminding them that all credit card numbers will be wiped and only the ones entered into the credit card fields will be automatically tokenized while the rest will be purged. Day 0 arrives and they tell us they're ready to flip the magic switch. We do some spot checking of customer data and see that almost no credit card numbers have been entered into the proper credit card field. I believe the actual number of properly handled credit card numbers was under 15%. We let them know what we found and provide about 100 examples for them to double check, telling them that they need to check the rest of their accounts as well. A couple of hours later, we get an angry call from their general manager wanting to know why their fancy new credit card machines still haven't been enabled. So we explained the situation to her and forwarded the previous emails to her, which she had already been included in, but whatever. She tells us what a huge disappointment we are and that for what she's paying us, we need to get this done now. We have her email back that she understands our concerns and that she is authorizing us to go ahead. 5 minutes later, the irreversible deed is done. I say irreversible because this customer didn't use our backup service and had neglected to maintain their own backups despite our insistence that it be done before the update and before forcing payment card industry compliance. A couple of weeks later, the general manager calls us wanting us to figure out why their credit card deposits don't reflect the business they've been doing. She's noticed a trend, she says, that only credit cards processed since the implementation of payment card industry compliance measures are showing up in her batches. This is when we remind her of our previous communications and her insistence that we proceed despite our protests. She demands that we recover her data for her. And again, we have to remind her of our previous communications that they are responsible for all backups. Apparently, she hadn't been reading anything at all and just thought making demands was going to get the job done properly. Thankfully, they only lost a couple of weeks of transactions and learned that from that point on to ask for a credit card when the card on file is missing. This person is still the general manager but has started using our hosted software solution, which at least now guarantees proper backup. Story 2. Backstory. I worked for 3 months during Christmas at a retail store. My wife was a middle manager, and they needed some help in the inventoristic room. My company was just getting off the ground, my chosen field was all but dead, so why not work a few months? Anyway, I got put in the back during the day. For 6 hours during my shift at the top of the hour, I would use a personal digital assistant to pull items from the storeroom so the floor could put them on the shelf. The basis behind the system was as things were sold. It was pulled from the back, and, if possible, it would keep the shelves full. Just one problem, it had a major glitch. If you logged something into the back room, then it would want you to pull it back the next hour, and it was awful. Put 1 can of green beans into the backroom inventory, and the next hour it will tell you to pull 500 cans, for example. So basically, the morning truck shift would put in the back anything that didn't fit on the shelves. So at noon it would tell me to pull all of it down. So we used a burn system. Basically, we told it, only when it glitched, that we pulled it, and there were more on the shelves in that location. Easy enough, and it worked. I only had to do that on the first pull of my shift. Anything from the floor that needed to be put back I did after the hourly pulls were done. The hourly pulls were only done 7 times a day. The opening guys would then burn those that needed it. Clean, efficient system. Until we got a new manager. First day that manager tore me a new one. I was not allowed to burn any pulls and was not allowed to have any backstock sitting. If it came back, I had to immediately shelve it, and any pulls the system listed were to be pulled. This turned into a giant mess. Instead of the sales floor having a small cart every hour, I was forced to use pallets. All the backstock from the truck went out on the first pull, and when 99% of that came back, it went back on the shelves and was pulled back the next hour. The personal digital assistant says that I need to pull 150 gallons of bleach. Well, I only have 60 on the shelf, so here are all of them. It got bad, pallets all over the store. The sales floor spent all their time trying to stock this stuff, so nothing got cleaned. It was a nightmare, everyone was angry, and the manager couldn't understand why nothing was getting cleaned. This went on daily, 7 days a week, for almost a month. The end of this came the day corporate did their yearly visit, so I'm back there and just got done with the pulls. There are 8 pallets for 6 sections. The corporate guy for inventory came back to talk to me, and we discussed the glitch. Turns out they were aware of it, and they started the burn system themselves until they could fix it. Also, that's why I had 2 hours at the end of my shift to backstock what needed to be backstocked. Needless to say, he wasn't happy. While the manager was technically correct according to store policy, they made an exemption because of the bug, which I might add they tried to fix later and made matters worse. The manager didn't last long because of that and other things. Story 3. Hello. I just remembered this story and am not 100% sure if it's malicious compliance, so forgive me if it's not. I was 14, maybe 2 months into high school, and in gym class. The teacher has us doing suicides: run forward to a point, run backwards to the line, run forward to the next point, backwards to the line when I tripped running backwards and threw my hands back to catch myself. Since we were doing the suicides on the rubber cement track, I felt instant pain and let out a cry. The teacher, without looking, said to go to the nurse while I sobbed in pain. I walked, by myself, up to the school doors and try to open the door, and I can't move my fingers. Since I was sent back by myself, I sit on the ground and sob some more. A FedEx driver pulled up, saw me, asked what's wrong, and instantly went into panic. He opened every door from the front door to the nurse. He explains how he found me, and she asks what happened. After explaining, she briefly looks at me and says, "The bell is about to ring. You are fine. Go back to class." When I asked her to just call my mom, she said no. She opens the door, after me faking about not being able to move my fingers, and I make my way back to the gym. I decided, even though I had a phone and could have asked someone to call my mom, that if I was fine, I would go back to class. I managed to convince a friend of my cousin's to take my binder and books to my next class, where I couldn't take notes or participate because I was getting dizzy from pain and wanted to be sick. I had one of my friends take my books from that class to the next one, my second to last class of the day, and my cousin was there. She sees me silently sobbing, trying to pay attention, and asks what happened. Once I explain, she called my mom in the middle of class. Not even 15 minutes later, my name is called from the speaker to go to the nurse. My cousin takes my stuff and puts it in my locker. Once I get to my mom, she explodes when she sees my wrists. Yes, you read that right, wrists are twice the size and purple. She is screaming, asking why she wasn't called and why I went back to class. I turned to the nurse and said, "She told me there was nothing wrong and that she wouldn't call you and to go back to class." My mom lost it. She screamed at the nurse, who only said, "I don't have X-ray vision, how would I have known?" Screamed at the principal, and took me to an emergency doctor appointment. The family doctor did X-rays and said I would have to go to the specialist in the morning, because it was so swollen, it looked like multiple fractures in both wrists, so he could not cast them. I had to endure another ride home and all night with acetaminophen as my only pain medication and bags of veggies on my wrists throughout the night. I went to the specialist who looked at both wrists and took more X-rays and came in asking what color I wanted my cast since both wrists were broken and along the growth plate, so maybe permanent weakness and/or pain for the rest of my life. Mother raised heck, sued the school. They refused to pay any expenses and said to sue them, demanded the nurse be fired. She was. And when the school was going to make me retake gym the next year and failed this year, she said no way was I being punished for their ineptitude. So that's the story of how I made my school my enemy because of a stupid nurse and the refusal to call my mother. Story 4. I studied social work in school. I found myself doing 3 genograms over the course of my schooling, one for intro to social work, one for sociology of mental health, and then another in my last year. I have some not fun family history and trauma, and so these assignments were never my favorite. But my teachers for the first two didn't pressure me to disclose only what I wanted and be vague. One even said I could do a fictional family. The last one did not. See, one thing we learned was that bringing up a client's trauma outside of a therapeutic environment can be harmful. We were Bachelor of Social Work students, which are not qualified therapists. During intakes and assessments, we learned to tell clients that they don't have to give more details than they wanted to. There's a whole host of reasons behind this, but I'll spare you all the lecture. I brought this up in class after this teacher assigned an extensive genogram with an accompanying 5-page essay on what we learned about ourselves. A third of the class expressed the same concerns. His reasoning was, you might be doing this with your clients, and you shouldn't ask them to do anything you wouldn't yourself. Not unless I get a graduate degree and become a therapist or psychologist. The teacher also didn't give us an answer when asked if resources for therapy would be provided if this brought up any student's past trauma that they needed to talk about. Oh, and of course, he added, this will only be shared with me and is 100% confidential unless you choose to share. Literally not any of our concerns, but I don't want to share any of my deeply personal business with this man. The assignment did not bother me as much as the hypocrisy of it all. I said, between class assignments and therapy, this will be my 5th one. Could I turn one of those in and be given an alternate assignment? He wouldn't budge. He said I didn't need to disclose anything I didn't want to, but followed it up with, but I expect you to take this assignment seriously. And when I turned in a rough draft with about as much as I was willing to disclose, he said it wasn't detailed enough. All right, Mr. It's showtime. I have a lot of family trauma that is not mine to disclose, and I rarely ever disclose it. At least not with anyone who would ever meet the folks involved. My own is embarrassing enough, but definitely not as bad as some. But I put all that stuff down on there and wrote about it. Then, the following week, the teacher asked if any students would like to share their genogram, if they're comfortable. My hand shot up. I will spare you the details, but I basically gave the class a content notice to allow anyone to leave who may be triggered a common thing in social work school, and then I just shared all of it. All of the relationships and why they were messed up and why I hate my dad and my sister resents my mom and all that. Cheery smile on my face the whole time. The teacher uncomfortably thanked me for my bravery. A few students shifted in their seats, feeling uneasy. Others smiled. Then my friend volunteered to share. She didn't like the assignment either, but she's not one to argue with teachers. Her presentation trumped mine. The girl had a real messed up family. And by the end, she was red in the face and everyone was super uncomfortable. Next person to volunteer to share was this girl who was in foster care. I'm not even sure if her sharing was malicious compliance, but hers was the most uncomfortable to hear. She started to cry at the end. Another student who also grew up in foster care started to tear up. The teacher cut us off after that. Another teacher overheard, and the following week, we had some serious discussions in class. I and the other students who shared were referred to the school's mental health center. Another teacher I had a good relationship with checked in with me, and I told her what happened. I can't tell for certain what went on, but it created a stink in their department. It's been several years since I graduated, but I heard there is now an alternative assignment for the genogram. So, lesson is, don't tell social work students to do something that you tell them to never do to their clients, and you don't get into social work unless you are traumatized. Story 5. So, in high school, and for 12 more years, I worked at the local grocery store. It was right across the street from a big video rental company that only has one location left. Anyway, I stopped by to rent a movie after work, still in my uniform, which was not a blue shirt. One of the ladies I know as a regular at the store said, "Hey, Joseph Kika, can you help me find this movie?" Thinking it was because we had somewhat of a friendship, I walked around, found it, and handed it to her. She said, "Thanks for finding it so quickly." Then, I went to find something to rent, and she said, "Oh my God, you helped me, and you don't even work here. I know you from the grocery store, but my brain just knew you would be able to help." She was super embarrassed, and I told her not to worry about it because it really wasn't a big deal. She then paid for my candy for her mistake. Story 6. I work at a fast food chain as a cook. The place is pretty laid back, except one of the managers has a stick up her butt. When it's not too busy, they let us play music in the kitchen, so long as the customers can't hear it. The staff likes to listen to hip-hop most of the time, which I'm not a big fan of. I mostly listen to rock and such. I don't want to hear what they play, so whenever they play music I put in headphones. Loud enough so I can't hear their music, but quiet enough so I can hear everything around me. So one day I'm making orders when my BY manager notices I have a headphone in and tells me I need to take it out. Me, why? They can listen to their music, why can't I listen to mine? B. Because they can still hear everything around them. You can't with headphones in. Me. But I only have one headphone in and I can hear just fine. B. I don't care. You need to take it out. Me, okay. But can I play music out loud just like them? B. So long as the customers can't hear it, yes. Me, okay. So long story short, after about 40 minutes of playing Baby Shark on repeat over top of their music, I was allowed to wear my headphones again. I'm sorry I put my coworkers through that, but it was the principle of a thing.